Once again, I find myself here, logging into Evelyn's account, writing up the events of the day. This is Dan, by the way. I'll start by saying Lynn is fine. Unlike last time, she's not arrested, she's not in the hospital missing more body parts. She's here at work, currently crouching on the fire escape like a gargoyle and pestering Bartholomew, trying to get him to eat a bean burrito. It's been a couple of days since the fog, and honestly, I wanted to tell my story, and lucky for me, Lynn still hasn't changed her laptop password. It's password, by the way. When the fog subsided, the place was a mess. The radio tower was fine, but the shed outside is half collapsed, the fire escape's leaning more than usual. Finn's already working on it. I got dozens of phone calls at the radio station that night. The police chief was furious, saying that he would have fired me on the spot if he had someone willing to take my place. People were confused. They were angry. Some of them didn't know what had happened, and others seemed to know exactly what had happened and wanted answers. It's the strangest storm I've ever seen, an elderly woman told me. Ripped the hinges right off my front door. My husband, he was out to check for the generator, and he hasn't come back, but there's holes in the ground outside, big ones. And the roof of our shed was completely ripped off. And the smell! As soon as the call ended, another came in. The man on the other end sounded furious. My chickens are inside out, all of them. Now what the hell does that? Turns them inside out. I tell you, I've never seen a mess like this in my whole life. When I find out what son of a bitch got in the coop and did this, well, let's just say my shotgun's gonna be waiting. Inside out, can you believe it? The final call of the night was the worst. The woman was crying. Such hysterics that I could hardly understand at first. Ma'am? I said sternly. Ma'am, calm down. Can you repeat what you just said, please? My son, she sobbed. Please, if anyone's seen my son, bring him home to me. He's only 9. His name is Michael. God, my chest hurts. Why did it have to be a child? Why did it always have to be a child? Where'd you last see him? I asked. There was a long pause on the other end of the phone, an eerie silence that didn't prepare me for what she would say next. Floating above the roof, she said softly. He was floating above the roof, as limp as a rag doll, and then he just disappeared into the fog. He never came back down. As bad as the calls were, it wasn't the worst thing. All night, until the first rays of sunshine rose over the mountains, there was something standing at the edge of the tree line. It was watching me for hours, smiling at me. And when I wasn't standing at the window, it would just stare into the security camera, knowing that I was on the other side. It's still hunting me. The thing I met on the stairwell. I can't begin to describe how good it felt to hand over the keys that morning. After all that had happened in the span of a few hours, Evelyn's tired face at 5 a.m. was the most wonderful thing I'd ever seen. She arrived an hour before her shift, her nose red from the cold air and lips chapped. She had scratches on her face, her eyes bloodshot. She looked clammy. She had a fever. Even so, I was happy to see her. Being alone never suited me, to be honest. I still don't know how Evelyn and Finn can handle being here by themselves so often, taking this pressure alone. I think I'd make a better co-host than a host. But now it was a brand new day, a brand new morning, right? Finally, it was my turn to go home and leave the station in the capable hands of this little weirdo that I called my friend. Before she even said anything, I pulled Lynn into a big hug, scooping her up while she struggled to stay on her tiptoes. She wasn't a big hugger, I knew that. But I think she could tell I needed it, because she didn't try to wiggle away this time. She was freezing cold, had snow sticking to her coat and hat, but still found myself not wanting to let go.
Morning, bitch mittens.
Evelyn said, sweetly, patting me on the back. Even our morning ritual of new insulting nicknames couldn't change the relief I felt to have my friend with me. I laughed softly, weakly. Good morning, you little tapeworm. I gave her one last squeeze and finally let her go. She stumbled, flat-footed on the floor before holding up a box of donuts. She grinned and chuckled like a little goblin showing off her spoils. You remembered breakfast, I commented.
I figured you earned it.
Evelyn said, as she closed the door behind her, taking off her winter coat but leaving the dark green beanie on her head. She began to set up her things for the day.
Hope you don't mind. I got him at the rest stop. You know, the one on the mountainside road with the rats. It was the only place that was open this early.
As long as the rats aren't an ingredient, I don't care, I said. And my smile disappeared when I noticed that she was limping. What happened to your leg? I asked, pointing at the one she seemed to be favoring. She looked down, picking up her boot gingerly.
Oh, you know, the usual. Got hit by a truck, broke all my bones. No, I just stepped on something sharp. Don't worry about it, my guy.
I didn't get the sense she was lying to me, only that maybe she wasn't giving me all the details.
How about you? Are you feeling okay?
We both knew that physically I was fine. I'd been safely tucked in the tower all night, exhausted but otherwise completely untouched. But Evelyn had known me for years now. She knew when something wasn't right, and there was no use in hiding something from her when she already knew the truth just from looking at my face. I'm okay, now, I said. It was a half-truth. Last night was rough.
You were late to the broadcast.
Evelyn pointed out as she picked a donut from the box. She didn't say it with a condescending tone, like she was scolding me. Rather, she just sounded concerned and worried that this might happen again. The question was hanging in the air. Why? She didn't ask it out loud, but I could feel it. There was guilt in the bottom of my heart, because I knew that anything that happened in town last night was my fault. It happened really quickly, that's all, I answered, avoiding her gaze as best I could. The one big blue eye of hers had a way of searching my soul for the truth. Before I knew what was happening, the fog was already here, and something was pounding on the door, talking to me, trying to convince me to go with it. Evelyn gave me a look, frown on her lips, and her one eye narrowing in suspicion. We were both wondering the same thing. When did they learn to do that? Suddenly, the abominations from the woods had found their voices. They learned the rules of the game, and they were trying to break them. Lynn was quiet, thinking to herself as she leaned against the desk and shoved part of a donut in her mouth. I noticed a fluttering of wings outside the window. Bartholomew had finally arrived to check on things, perching outside on the fire escape and ruffling his feathers to get rid of the snow they had gathered. Evelyn licked her fingers and broke her donut in half, rushing over to the fire escape. She turned off the alarm and slipped out, dropping part of the pastry in one of the bird feeders that we had placed outside the window. It was my idea. Finn put them up for us last year.
Here you go, you little shit beast. Don't say I never gave you nothing.
Bartholomew responded by chirping at her shrilly and then pecking at the donut, getting crumbs everywhere. Lynn even tried to pet him, but the bird snapped his beak at her fingers, nearly giving her a nasty bite. He still didn't like her. At all. And Evelyn, in a predictably display of 100% unfiltered dumbassery, snapped her teeth at the bird in response, like she was about to bite him back. She would bite a bird, I think, if you gave her the chance, and maybe a $5 bill. If you've been wondering, yes, this stupid feud has been going on this entire time. Years have passed, and Lynn still wants nothing more than to fight a goddamn sparrow. Or a chickadee? I don't know. I'm not a bird scientist. Evelyn came back into the broadcast room, shaking snow out of her hair.
Hey, Danny, why don't you take off? I think I got it under control now. Barty will help me keep an eye on the place. Ugh.
She leaned against the desk, keeping her weight on one foot.
Go home. Get some sleep. Like, take a bubble bath or something. Just get the forest stink off of you.
As much as I didn't like seeing Lynn spend the day here all by herself, I was eager to take her up on that offer. I buttoned my coat, slipped a pair of gloves on my hands, preparing for how cold the seat of my old station wagon would be. Here's the keys. I left today's news line up on the desk. Oh, and I made you a pot of coffee. I gestured to the kitchen, then grabbed a donut for the road. I'll see you tomorrow afternoon, okay?
Sure will.
She smiled at me, but there was sadness there. Now I know the reason why. She knew what I would find at the end of the road.
Safe travels, cowboy.
I shoved the pastry in my mouth on the way down the rickety old winding stairs, but when I got to the bottom I noticed that my car was covered in more than just frost. Broken twigs, dead leaves covered it from top to bottom, as well as long streaks of mud across the sides. At least, I think it was mud. There was a dent in one door that hadn't been there before, and one of the side view mirrors was completely missing. I made an exasperated sound as I threw my bag in the back seat and got to work trying to scrape all the frozen dirt off the windshield. The back window was even more cracked than it had been before, just my luck. Hey, thanks a lot! I shouted into the woods while throwing parts of the tree branches as far as I could. I really appreciate it, assholes. It's what I always wanted. Jesus, Mary, and... ugh. When I got into my car, I was in a rotten mood, tapping my fingers across the steering wheel impatiently. On the drive home, I saw the full extent of what had happened the night before. Power lines were down. Streets were closed off. There were potholes in the road big enough to fall into. Windows were shattered down the business district, and a few doors were hanging off their hinges. A few roofs had even caved in. There was one traffic light in the whole town, and now it was dangling in the middle of the intersection. Evelyn never told me about all this. My God. This was my fault. When I got to the apartment building, it wasn't any better. There was a dark, slimy residue against the bricks, all the way up to the top floor. Some of them shaped like little handprints. I could see Lynn's windows, smeared and cracked. Curtains were drawn, the power was out. A pile of broken glass crunched under my feet as I stepped up to the door, and I noticed bloody footprints against the pavement. The door was dented and the windows were broken, letting the cold in. Someone had attempted to put duct tape over it, but it only did so much good. I'd managed my way around a cleaning crew who were mopping up the floors. The water in the buckets was a deep red. I passed a few of my neighbors, but we didn't look one another in the eye. Briefly, I wondered if they knew. I wondered if they blamed me too. I don't think I took more than 5 steps into the apartment before I was already falling onto the bed face first. Before I could even kick off my shoes or take out my hearing aid, the mental and emotional exhaustion of the night completely shut me down. I fell into a deep sleep. My dreams were cold that morning. I felt as if I had been submerged in freezing water, floating in a sea of pure ice without a surface to swim towards. My body was just suspended, floating, drifting. All around me I saw shadows moving in one direction, as if a magnetic force was pulling them in. I started to float, too, just another ghost amongst the rest. In my dream, I heard a bellow from the deep. The whole world shook, and even though my feet didn't touch the ground, I still felt it all the way down in my bones. The ground cracked and opened before us. In the icy cold void ahead of me, I saw a bright magenta-colored light rising out of the dark. We were all drifting towards it, the shadows and I, drawn to an endless pit like lambs to slaughter. The figures ahead of me began to fall, further and deeper until they disappeared into the light. One by one, they were eaten alive, until I was the only one left. I was so cold I was shivering, hardly able to feel my fingers and toes. Wait, my toes. I was touching the ground again. I was standing on 2 feet, shoes still on, hearing the sudden crunch of twigs beneath me as if I had just fallen onto the forest floor. With a startled breath, my eyes flew open, and I fell back into my body once again. I felt so disoriented, so confused, so absolutely fucking freezing. It was dark. I was outside, I was looking around, I saw snow and trees and shrubs and... Oh no. Oh no, oh God. What had I done? I turned to one side, then the other, spinning in a circle to try to find my way out. I was in the woods. I was deep in the woods. Far enough to see nothing but rows and rows of pines surrounding me. I had no light, no coat, nothing but a hearing aid in my head and the clothes I'd fallen into bed wearing. Was I still asleep? Wake up! I shouted, slapping myself in the face. Wake up, you idiot! Wake up! It didn't accomplish anything except make my right cheek sore and red. This wasn't real. This wasn't happening. I was still at home, asleep in my bed, having restless dreams because of a really, really terrible day, right? I pinched my arm as hard as I could, but all it did was hurt. I could see my breath with each trembling exhale, and my eyes were already stinging in the winter air. God, it was dark. It was so dark, so dark that the only tiny bit of solace I could find was in the brief moments when the moon peered from behind the cloud. How long had I been asleep? How long had I been in the woods? How long before morning? I couldn't stay here. I mean, no matter how lost I was, by now we had learned the forest didn't need a foggy day to get violent. It just needed a victim stupid enough to walk into its clutches like an insect flying into a trap. I was in their territory now. Every part of me wanted to shout and scream, to call out for help and hope that someone could hear me. But what if something else heard me? What if it already knew I was here? I picked a direction and walked, noticing that the ground seemed to tilt downward more on one side than the other. So long as I made my way down from the mountain, I'd find a way out. All the while, my eyes were scanning the horizon for the light to the radio tower, with the faint hope that maybe I was close to the station. I couldn't see it yet. Slowly, I took another step. My foot snapped a twig beneath me, and I winced, the echo making every hair on my back and my neck stand on end. I paused for a moment, just listening. Waiting. Perhaps if I stood still enough, nothing could catch me, but I heard it. Another twig, another snap. It was close by. My heart started pounding, and I held my breath, too scared to move. The only thing I could do was turn my eyes a little to the left, seeing a shadow standing between the trees just a few yards away. It stood completely still, facing me in absolute silence. I was afraid to take my eyes off the thing, and it didn't seem to want to look away from me either. We were the same size, the same shape. If I didn't know better, I would have thought that it was my own shadow. Fuck. The way my stomach turned when I realized what I was looking at almost made me sick on the spot. I recognized it. The thing that wore my face. We met on the stairs, this shadow and I staring at one another through the window while he pounded on the door, demanding that I let him in. It spoke to me. I didn't know they could speak like that. This one did. But how did it get in my face? I dared to take a single step in the opposite direction, keeping my eyes on the black mass between the tree trunks. When I moved, it stepped in the same direction like a mirror image. I stepped again. It stepped again. I moved my arm up above my head, and the doppelganger did the same. 2 more steps I took, walking backwards while the strange vision walked forwards, always keeping the same speed and distance away from me. We stood still. The creature and I, just staring at one another. Maybe it was just playing a game, maybe toying with me for its own amusement was enough. Somewhere up the mountain I heard a low bellow, like the voice of an elk and a whale mixed together. I had to go. I picked up my foot, ready to take another step in the original direction, when I noticed the shadow twitch. Its head snapped, its shoulders rising and prickling in defense. All at once, the thing broke into a full sprint towards me, and I immediately dug my heels under the ground and started to run. My lungs were burning in the cold air. My shoes were soaked with snow and ice, but the discomfort couldn't stop me. I was blinded by terror, watching trees fly by as I stumbled over roots and branches all the way. The forest was alive around me. Even the plants seemed to move and lean in my direction, as if trying to get up and run after me. Small animals streaked and scampered away from my path. Faintly, I could hear the cry and sobs of human voices, calling out in pure agony in every single direction. All those lost souls, ghosts, drifting through the pines. They were trying to take me with them, thin arms sprouting from the trees like bodies sewn into the bark, trapped forever. The footsteps behind me were growing faster, louder. The shadow was gaining on me, snarling and howling as it went. Oh my God. I knew I was going to die. I could sense it. The forest was swallowing me whole, and there was absolutely no end in sight. But then, like a beacon on the horizon, I saw a tiny red light. It was the very tip of the radio tower. I was so close to escape, so close to safety. Just a little while longer is all I needed, but the thing on my heels was gaining closer every moment. Its heavy footfalls even louder than before, as if the beast had grown in size. All around me, the ground began to shake, and I knew one misstep would be the end of me. Some of the trees looked upside down, floating in the air, but I couldn't tell if it was real or if it was just me, in my head. I was already thinking of all the things I had never done. Oh God, so many goals were left behind to rot, so many things I never did, things unsaid to people who mattered to me. I was going to die before becoming a person worth being proud of. Who wants to die a miserable, pathetic fuck-up? No, these weren't my thoughts. The shadow was in my head now, whispering to me, putting these words in my head. It's time to give up, it hissed. Give up and let me win. It's what you want. It's what you've always wanted, for all of this to be over. The trees were growing thinner. I could see a field of snow ahead, and finally, the clearing was near. Just a few more steps. That's all it took. So why did I want to stop? Why, for a split second in time, did I want to just let the forest take me? It would be so easy to just stop running, wouldn't it? It would be quick, I'm sure. Maybe not painless, but quick. I heard that voice again, my voice. You can end it. I can help you. You won't even feel a thing. But I could see the radio tower. I could see the old fire-watched lights on the inside, figure standing by the window. Evelyn was looking at one of the monitors for the security cameras. I watched her drop her cup of coffee, immediately rush to the door to unlock the fire escape. She saw me. And I knew that if I gave up now, she'd bring me back from the dead just to kick my ass. I practically flew from the tree line and into the snow, stumbling and falling on my way to the fire escape. At the top, Evelyn already had the door unlocked and open, her stark white and freckled face regarding me with terror and confusion. That thing behind me was still growling and snarling with every step I made in those metal stairs. Clang, 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 one loud, heavy step at a time. 2 pairs of feet. When I reached the top, I threw myself into the broadcasting room and screamed at Evelyn, "Close it! Close the fucking door!" She did as I said, slamming the door shut and locking it behind me. I pushed her to the other side of the room as I started to barricade it with chairs, a table, anything I could find. I was trembling from head to foot, but I didn't know if it was mostly from the cold or from the fear of almost certain death. Evelyn was grabbing her winter coat.
Dan?
She spoke sternly.
Dan, slow down. Jesus Christ, slow down.
I finally backed away from the door, breathing heavily and feeling lightheaded. I stumbled and I fell to the floor. Which time Lynn quickly put her coat over my shoulders and held my arms tightly to my sides.
Man, what the absolute fuck were you doing?
She asked as soon as my trembling began to subside. Her voice wavered with so much anxiety. It was aggressive and furious at the same time. She began to pace around the room, shaking with anger.
How did you even get out there? It's almost midnight, Dan. And after yesterday? After we thought you were gone? You could have gotten hurt. You could have died out there.
I almost did, I yelled, rocking back and forth on the floor while gripping the coat. The fucking thing chased me for a half a mile. You saw it. It broke the tree line. It's outside the door. It was... Evelyn's expression went from angry to just confused and maybe a little hurt. I'd never screamed at her before, not like that. I watched her frown turn deep with concern as she leaned against the window and gently slid down to the floor with her arms crossed. She sat across from me, her anger deflated, replaced with something far more distressed. She shook her head.
Nothing was chasing you, Danny.
This is Daniel Esperanza of 104.6 FM. Took a long time, but I think this place is finally starting to get into my head.